This episode of Paradigm Profiles is called Mauled to Death. Presa Canarios are a Spanish breed of a large dog of Mastiff or catch dog type. It originates in the autonomous region of the Canary Islands of Gran Canaria and Tenerife. It was formerly known as the Dogo Canario. The life expectancy for these specific dogs typically range from 9 to 11 years. A healthy female Presa Canario normally grows anywhere from 22 to 24 inches in height and often weighs between 83 and 110 pounds. A healthy male normally grows between 24 and 26 inches in height and typically weighs between 110 and 130 pounds. This is not a violent or aggressive dog. The temperament is usually described as being suspicious, stubborn, strong-willed, gentle, dominant, and calm. However, like pit bulls, bull mastiffs, Rottweilers, and some breeds of wolves, this particular breed of dog has been falsely stereotyped and characterized as being violent, vicious, menacing, and bloodthirsty dogs. This simply is not true and is one of the stigmas that has given this breed a bad name. All breeds of dogs can be made to be vicious if that's how they're trained to be. But they can also be trained to be friendly, affectionate, well-disposed, and congenial. Domesticated dogs, for the most part, are docile animals. By nature, they're obedient, submissive, and yielding to humans. That, by definition, is what defines them as being domesticated. But all dogs have their own characters too. Some are real hyperactive, some are quiet and lethargic, others are happy and bark a lot. Some are curious and happy while others might be timid and antisocial. Each dog is different and the temperament could depend on a lot of different things. Some of the stronger, more aggressive looking dogs are sometimes feared and ostracized simply because of how they're trained and the histories of these dogs attacking people. This is an unfortunate circumstance because this has had a detrimental effect on the entire breed and it creates a feigned sense of fear in people. This story is a prime example of how a small group of imprudent, irresponsible, and ill-willed people bred, trained, and sold Presa Canario dogs for illegitimate purposes. Because of their nefarious and diabolical engagements, they succeeded in creating an epidemic of deep-seated fear and aversion in an entire community, not only about the specific breed of Presa Canarios, but also about other breeds of large dogs. It also shed a brighter light on how much culpability dog owners should be held to answer for when they've played an intricate role in not only training them, but also when these dogs were used for intimidation and harassment purposes. As the story progresses, it details some of the strange and bizarre occurrences that transpired between two criminal defense lawyers, a convicted murderer that they adopted while he was in prison, the criminal underworld he was involved in, and the journey they embarked on through the Aryan Brotherhood. Pelican Bay State Prison is a maximum security prison nestled deep in the green foliage of Del Norte County's Pacific coast. The prison lies in a detached section of Crescent City, several miles north of the main urban area just south of the Oregon border. PBSP's primary purpose is to house violent male prisoners from the California state prison system. 40% of Pelican Bay state inmates are serving life sentences and nearly all have histories of violence at other California prisons, which resulted in their transfer to Pelican Bay. The sole exception are the institution's minimum security inmates who work as part of the prison's outside maintenance and firefighter programs. The most securest part of the prison is the SHU program, where 2,300 inmates spend 23 hours a day in their cells, locked up and isolated from the rest of the institution's general population. These inmates are locked up in the SHU program and are considered the worst of the worst, the incorrigibles, who are a threat to the safety and security of the institution. Many of these inmates are hardcore gang members, and others were placed in the SHU because of their propensity to commit acts of violence against other inmates and staff. Those who are a part of this prison subculture respectfully refer to Pelican Bay State Prison as the White House because this is where leadership is housed for most, if not all, of the major California prison gangs. One of those inmates, a documented former Aryan Brotherhood leader, Paul Cornfed Schneider, was housed in the SHU program due to his gang affiliation with the Aryan Brotherhood. His cellmate, Dale Bretches, was also a documented Aryan Brotherhood leader. Slammed down and locked in a cell for 23 hours a day, every day, they had nothing but time to plot, scheme, scam, and orchestrate their illicit, criminally influenced minds. Cornfed is serving 3 life sentences and is currently housed in a federal WITSEC program. Originally sent to Pelican Bay for armed robbery and drug trafficking, Cornfed was eventually convicted of other crimes, including arranging a robbery that resulted in the 1995 murder of Sonoma County Sheriff's Deputy Frank Trejo, attempting to murder 2 other people and conspiring to kill 3 more, including Robert Scully, convicted of firing the shotgun blast that killed Trejo, a 35-year veteran of law enforcement. Assistant Prosecutor Kimberly Guilfoyle Newsom, then wife of Gavin Newsom, governor of California since 2010, divorced Newsom in 2005, went on to stardom in a variety of broadcast roles for the Fox television network, and since 2018 has been dating loser Donald Trump Jr., beginning before his divorce. So the crux of this story involves 2 criminal defense lawyers, Robert Noel and Marjorie Knoller, who got involved with a mix of convicts, prison, drugs, a bizarre love triangle, and killer dogs. The dogs were kept in an upscale San Francisco apartment, and one day the dogs killed a neighbor. The story goes something like this. Marjorie Knoller is walking her dogs when she runs into Diane Whipple, who is entering her apartment. There's a confrontation and the dogs attack. Whipple is ripped to pieces as Knoller calmly watches. Investigators were apparently looking into the possibility that sexual abuse of the animals may have spurred the attack on Whipple. Later on during the trial, the jury actually felt that the owner ordered the dogs to attack. Whipple was carrying groceries into her apartment when she ran into Knoller and her dogs. The male dog named Bane sniffed Whipple and nudged her crotch. Whipple pushes Bane away and Bane explodes in rage, where it ripped her throat, bit her all over, and dragged her body around the hallway. While all this happened, Marjorie Knoller is believed to have just stood by and watched. After the attack, and after Bane had essentially torn Whipple apart, it is alleged that Knoller callously stepped over Diane's body to get back into her apartment. She left one of the dogs in the hallway, and one was brought inside. According to medical reports, Whipple sustained a total of 77 bite wounds, the most serious ones being severe bites to her neck. At some point during the attack, the dog severed her jugular. The first police officer on the scene described how Whipple laid in a pool of blood and was crawling to her apartment, bleeding profusely. According to this officer, she was suffering immensely, and the deep gashes of flesh that she had endured were pulled back like flaps of skin that had been peeled back. As she was crawling on the floor, she was emitting deep groans of pain that sounded more like she was underwater. This wasn't what they call her death rattle, but they were sounds coming deep from within her throat, and they bubbled out of one of the gashes in her neck. Although Whipple was immediately rushed to the hospital, she would end up dying soon after arriving at the hospital on the operating table. An investigation ensued after Diane Whipple was pronounced dead at the hospital. Investigators, as well as her family and her live-in partner Sharon Smith, all wanted to know how a young, vibrant, healthy 33-year-old woman like Whipple had been basically slaughtered in the hallway of her own apartment building. The initial investigation began by revealing that there were actually a multitude of complaints lodged by neighbors and pedestrians to public safety agencies with regards to 2 large dogs that were being allowed to create an atmosphere of fear and tolerance. Despite the fact that over 30 complaints were filed over the course of several months, no one seemed to have taken the complaints seriously, unfortunately until it was too late. In fact, the victim, Whipple herself, had previously been bitten on the left wrist by one of the dogs who would end up killing her later. During that attack, she escaped serious injury because the watch she was wearing apparently took the force of the bite and stopped the attack. At the time of the attack, Whipple and her companion Sharon Smith had only moved into the building a month before Whipple was killed and 5 days after her 33rd birthday. On the day Whipple was killed, Noller took the two dogs named Bane and Hera to the rooftop of the 6th floor apartment house to relieve themselves. Though each dog had repeatedly menaced and even bitten fellow tenants, Noller did not muzzle them. They were reportedly leashed, however, as Noller led them down from the roof, encountering Whipple as she tried to unlock her apartment door while carrying 2 bags of groceries. Weighing more together at 233 pounds than Whipple and Noller combined, Bane and Hera raced to attack Whipple. They dragged Noller behind them, Noller claimed later. Bane was the aggressor. He led the attack and Hera instinctively followed suit. Later, forensic evidence showed that Bane tore Whipple's throat so severely as to almost decapitate her, inflicting 77 bites to almost every part of her body. Hera, the female dog, helped to tear most of Whipple's clothing off. Noller claimed she threw herself on top of Whipple to try to save her, but her account was not supported by the physical evidence, which included cuts and bites to her extremities and a torn sweatshirt sleeve, but no injuries to the parts of her body which would have shielded Whipple. Police and ambulance responded promptly to calls from 2 other residents of the building who had heard Whipple scream, but Whipple died 70 minutes later, having lost half the blood in her body. One of the animal control officers, Michael Scott, would later testify that Bane was still in such a fury when he arrived that 3 tranquilizer darts had no effect. San Francisco control staff euthanized Bane later that day. Hera, held as evidence, was euthanized soon after on January 30, 2002. In the days following Whipple's death, both Noller and Noel made grotesque comments that essentially blamed the victim for her own death. For them, it seemed clear. Whipple's savaging was, at worst, an inconvenience and annoying public relations problem. Noller told reporters that she'd instructed Whipple to be still, adding coolly that the woman would still be alive if she had done so. Noel, on the other hand, made a thinly veiled dig at Whipple's sexual orientation, suggesting she might have excited Bane by a pheromone-bearing perfume or the use of steroids. After Hazmat cleaned up the blood and the rest of the crime scene, the only signs left that indicated that Whipple had been there were chunks of her scalp that still had hair attached to it and her house keys that were still inserted inside the lock. But when investigators and crime scene officers searched Noller and Noel's apartment for more evidence shedding light on the dogs' history, where they got them from, and anything that would show that these dogs were trained to kill, that's when the case took a strange and bizarre twist. Documents that included personal correspondence to and from inmates in Pelican Bay State Prison, plans detailing the development of a Southern California-based breeding company, and legal adoption papers uncovered the couple's involvement in even a more sinister plot, assisting known members of the Aryan Brotherhood. Seized from Noller and Noel's apartment were 3 handguns, a shotgun, a computer, 11 packets of letters, magazines and photographs, and Manstopper, a guard dog training manual with photos of Bane on the cover. The manual was said to have been inscribed by Dale Bretches, 44, a cellmate of Paul Cornfed Schneider, 38, at Pelican Bay State Prison, where the two reputedly directed the activities of the nationwide Aryan Brotherhood white supremacist prison gang while serving life sentences. Bretches, convicted in 1979 of second-degree murder for killing a man in San Diego, was in 2012 allowed to distribute his own book about breeding and training dangerous dogs, Doggo War, after a 5-year court battle. In the book, Bretches refers to Noller and Noel as do-gooder attorneys who were unfairly prosecuted because of pressure from the San Francisco's homosexual syndicate. The book was printed in 2005 by a self-publishing company, iUniverse, but Bretches and his lawyer halted publication after Pelican Bay's warden barred distribution in the prison. Prison officials cited their rule against inmate-run businesses and also said some of the content could threaten prison security, including descriptions of dogfighting and Bretches' fighting skills, the identification of another inmate as an informer, and numerous anti-gay passages. Both Noel and Noller had represented Bretches and Snyder in several lawsuits against the California Department of Corrections. Evidence brought out in the trial would show that Noller and Noel had taken in the huge, frightening dogs to accommodate Snyder and Bretches, who were allegedly running the dog business in order to produce fighting dogs and guard dogs for methamphetamine labs run by the Mexican Mafia. The cellmates denied that, although their artwork and correspondence make perfectly clear that a chief aim was to breed animals who were as large and terrifying as possible. A drawing by Paul Cornfed Schneider purportedly showing Bane at left, then Robert Noel as a knight, himself as a prince in the middle, and Marjorie Noller as a queen at right, but none of the images closely resembled the people they have said to be. Both Bretches and Cornfed were validated and documented members of the Aryan Brotherhood. The California Department of Corrections attributes at least 40 prison killings to the group, with 7 murders at Pelican Bay alone in just 2 years, 1996 and 1997. Officials have labeled Snyder as an Aryan Brotherhood shot caller, meaning that he is believed to order killings for the group both inside and outside of the prison. Bretches' illicit vision to create this dog breeding company was part of a bigger criminal conspiracy that's whole purpose was centered on generating money for the Aryan Brotherhood. Investigators working with agents from the SSU and the Institutional Gang Intel Unit conducted a search warrant on Cornfed and Bretches' cell and subsequently found the hard copies to his intricate business plans. Bretches had planned to buy dozens of Presa Canarios and then crossbreed the dogs with other genetically enhanced dogs for the purpose of creating a superior breed of dog. The concept was adopted from Hitler's philosophy of creating a superior white race. They even hired a clinical geneticist from Germany that specialized in procreation and mixing both human and animal chromosomes. The perfect specimen was predicted to grow between 34 and 36 inches in height and weigh between an astonishing 160 to 180 pounds. This would have dwarfed the Presa Canario breed, essentially creating a super dog on steroids. Both Bane, Hera, and 6 other Presa Canarios were bought for Bretches and Snyder by intermediary Brenda Story and then were raised by Janet Combs of Hayfort, California. However, at one point, Cornfed and Bretches became upset with Combs when she told them that 6 of their puppies were killed by their mother. Combs also complained that the dogs had also eaten her chickens, her sheep, and her daughter's cat. This is what caused them to have Noller and Noel take possession of the dogs. California Department of Corrections prison gang expert Devin Hawks learned of the dog raising business in 1999 when Combs reported that she had been frightened by individuals at Pelican Bay who had consigned a number of Presa Canarios to her care. Cornfed and Bretches had invested almost $20,000 in cash in the business, which they told Combs had come from the settlement in a lawsuit won by another inmate. In reality, the money was acquired from criminal activities conducted by members of the Aryan Brotherhood on the streets of California. The business model, which Bretches dubbed Doggo War, could have actually been the basis for a RICO case, but prosecutors decided that the effects wouldn't have accomplished much and that Cornfed and Bretches were already serving multiple life sentences. Even as Hawks looked into the apparent violation of rules prohibiting inmates from running unapproved businesses, Cornfed asked Noel and Noller to help recover the dogs from Combs, who found them terrifying. Noller and Noller did so, taking Hera and Bane into their own apartment in early 2000 after placing 6 other Presa Canarios elsewhere. But here's where the story takes a bizarre twist. Topless photos of Noller were found in Cornfed's cell, along with correspondence among Noller, Noel, and Cornfed, described by those who read it as erotic. What exacerbated the obvious love triangle is the fact that Noller and Noel were discovered to have completed a legal adoption of Cornfed, which would have made the relationship incestuous. This was also completed several days after Whipple was killed, reportedly for the purpose of facilitating overnight visits. In one letter, Noel boasted to Cornfed of an incident in which Bane and Hera rushed out an elevator, nearly knocking down Whipple, whom Noel mocked as a timorous little mousy blonde who almost had a coronary. San Francisco prosecutors Terrence Hallinan, James Hammer, and Kimberly Guilfoyle Newsom were prevented by San Francisco Superior Court James Warren from presenting evidence that Noller and Noel had sexual relations with the dogs, which they contended might have contributed to the fatal attack. A source close to the investigation claimed that Noller used to masturbate the male dog Bane, and that her and Noel both used to let the dogs Bane and Hera lick their genitalia and their anus. The dogs would become extremely excited by the different female and male hormones. This heightened level of excitement is what the prosecution contends caused Bane to react to Whipple's rejection. He went straight for her crotch, and she immediately pushed him away, causing him to become agitated. Bestiality isn't something that you hear too much about these days, but this fixation still seems to exist amongst some older couples who have lost interest in each other. I distinctively remember the first time I met Cornfed in his celly, Dale Bretches in Pelican Bay. It was sometime around 1999 to 1996. I wasn't housed in the same block with him. I ran into him in the law library. Back in the early 90s, up until around 98, they used to run the entire C facility to the law library at the same time. Not literally the whole facility, but they used to run different blocks with different blocks. They'd usually pick up about 4 inmates from each block, so back then you could be housed in C4 and end up running into someone else that was housed in C11. They stopped this in late 1998, early 1999 because of yours truly, me and Tomas Chopo McIntosh from Watsonville, after we got caught passing hot paperwork in the form of legal work from one block to another. Chopo was the one who really got caught sending something to me, but it didn't matter. Because of this incident, Devin Hawks, the IGI, had the law library policies changed to only taking one block at a time. But when we were still going together, I ran into Cornfed in his celly Dale Britches. I actually knew who they were before I met them and had already heard their names due to the fact that it was customary practice for the NF to keep running rosters of all our opposition's names, AKAs, and where they were from. At that time, this included the Eme, the Aryan Brotherhood, and the Nazi lowriders. The day I met Cornfed and Bretches, I heard Cornfed talking before I got to see what he looked like. I remember hearing someone talking that spoke real loud, had a real deep voice, and talked like he was a straight fucking cowboy. Seriously, this fool had an accent like he was from somewhere like Wyoming or Montana, straight off the range. I got put in a cage 2 spots down from where he was, so we ended up engaging in a conversation. After he introduced himself and told me who he was and who was in his block as far as my people, I told him who was in my block as far as the ABs. At that time, there were 2 ABs in my pod, Danny T. Troxell, and his celly, Danny C., whose last name I can't remember. Cornfed asked me if I could take a kite back to Danny T for him, so I shot him a line and passed it off for him. That was literally the first and last time I would ever run into Cornfed for the rest of the time that I was there. Later, I'd hear that he cooperated, debriefed, and that he was shipped out to one of those federal WITSEC. If I had to bet, I'd probably say that he was in the one that they have out there in Missouri, as that's where they send a lot of guys from Northern and Southern California. Noller and Noel were tried in Los Angeles rather than San Francisco in order to find an impartial jury. Noller, on March 21st, 2002, was convicted of second-degree murder. Both Noller and Noel were also convicted of manslaughter and keeping a dangerous animal. Judge Warren, on appeal in 2004, threw out the second-degree murder conviction and allowed Noller to be released on bail as she had completed her manslaughter sentence. The California First District of Appeal in May 2005 reinstated the second-degree murder conviction. Further litigation in the conviction and sentence continued until February 2016, when the conviction was affirmed by U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. This case is one of those unique cases as it defines an area in criminal law that's been kind of a gray area insofar as how culpable dog owners should be held to answer when their dogs have either mauled or killed someone. This case set the precedent that you can be held criminally culpable just based on ownership alone. Although this wasn't the case here with Noller and Noel, the appeal court still set the precedent and defined this gray area of law. This particular case, on the other hand, had a lot of contributing factors that worked against Noller and Noel. Their involvement with the Aryan Brotherhood, evidence describing the illicit way these dogs were supposed to be used to guard methamphetamine labs, and the accusations made against Noller with regards to why she just allegedly stood by and didn't try to stop the attack. This was supposed to have stemmed from Noller and Noel's disdain towards Whipple due to her sexual preferences and just the fact that they didn't like her. What do you guys think? Do you guys think someone should be held criminally and civilly accountable if their dog gets loose and kills another human being? I personally have mixed feelings about this. I think it's a little unfair if you hold someone criminally accountable absent any evidence that they trained this dog to be mean or aggressive, and if there was never any history of the animal showing signs of aggression. If there's nothing they did malicious, and there's no evidence that they ever did anything that can prove that they were directly responsible for causing this attack, how can society hold them responsible just based on the fact of mere ownership? Now, if there's contributing factors that can be proven, such as training the animal to attack, using the animal for criminal activities, using the animal to intimidate, etc., then I think this is different. This issue has been a hot topic of debate since the judge in this case threw the case out for those same reasons. For argument's sake, let's just say you have a small 40-pound terrier that's never shown any signs of aggression, and he was never trained or taught how to bite other people. You throw a function at your house with friends and family, and the dog unexpectedly mauls and kills a 3-year-old child. Should the owner be held to answer criminally absent of any other contributing circumstances and just based on the fact that they're the owner? Or should the dog be held to answer for its own actions? I guess it just depends on each case when you weigh out the mitigating and aggravating circumstances. I'm interested in hearing some of your opinions and your feedback on this. Anyways, after the 9th District Court of Appeals affirmed Noller's conviction in this case, her bail was revoked and she was returned to prison to continue serving her 15-to-life prison sentence. Cornfed, on the other hand, claiming to have left the Aryan Brotherhood in 2003, is now serving a triple life sentence and is being held in the federal WITSEC program for his own safety. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Paradigm Profiles. Again, we want to extend our appreciation to all of you who have continued to support the channel. If it wasn't for you guys, this channel wouldn't exist.